embrace that? Why do they embrace that? And why does everybody do it? What are the components of that?
Okay, so I can respond to that. And I think it's mandated. I think it's a requirement. I think it's connected to standards. So there is not a lot of choice as to whether you will not use the design curriculum. It is just instructional staff have the autonomy of how that looks in the rollout.
So who mandates the rollout of a new language arts curriculum? Who's the one saying you must do this? Who's got that sort of authority?
Teaching and Learning, Kevin Hendricks.
So I'm asking this at you particularly, Nancy, since you are the union rep. So when teachers hear we have a new curriculum, they say, okay, they may not be thrilled, but they do it.
Right. Well, we do. I mean, Kevin Hendrick is wonderful. I have to say, he does everything with his teacher hat on, even though he has not worn a teacher hat, in quite a while, because he was a principal before he moved into teaching and learning. But he does always think back to what his world was like as a teacher. And granted, teaching changes, and it's definitely not exactly the same, but it's very helpful that he comes at it from that point of view.
So give me some examples of what he does with the curriculum, because I bet he doesn't say, do you want a new curriculum? Somebody says we're getting a new one, but it sounds like they give them some choices. So what does it look like to have his teacher hat on that makes it palatable for teachers?
Well, what they are doing is that it is being teacher created. They have taken teachers, volunteers who work after school, and they are paid to review the curriculum, write the curriculum, work with teams on the curriculum. And then when it's passed out to the teachers in the buildings, they ask for feedback. When you've completed the module, they want feedback from the teachers to incorporate and constantly be upgrading the curriculum. That is, and I actually know this because at a last meeting that I had with my representatives, the faculty representatives, that question came up. Where did the curriculum come from and who's doing the curriculum? So I asked Kevin, and he gave me a very, very detailed explanation about how that's being done. Now,
are you in a new curriculum rollout right now?
Well, yes, because the best standards are brand new.
Got it. Okay.
Just rolled out.
So it's aligned with best standards. That's part of it too.
Correct.
And do district folks and principals as well, do they say, oh yes, the state has these standards, we must work towards those? Is that a pretty commonly held and believed necessity? I don't know if I'm saying that right.
By the educators, believing.
Yes, by the educators, yeah.
Not totally, no.
Okay. So here's what I heard you say. I'm going to just check for understanding here with me. That he does it with a teacher hat on, and that means things like they don't get to decide, do you get a new curriculum, but they have a lot of input in, they're paid to review the curriculum, write training guides or things like that, feed into they don't actually create the curriculum, do they?
They do. And
okay.
that's where the pushback is coming. Because I do believe that providing curriculum for those who may not be familiar with curriculum writing is a great idea, and having it being teacher created, again, wonderful. But there are teachers who just need to understand, have training in the new standards, and then be allowed to have the option of using their own curriculum as long as it's guided by the standards. I do find that most teachers with more experience prefer that.
Yeah.
They prefer to write their own curriculum based on whatever changes are mandated. The mandated changes we all get, we have to abide by. So I'm
hearing that there's some, it's really standards driven. And while we might purchase a curriculum and you can use that, if you have some skill level or whatever, you are allowed to personalize it in some way, as long as you're working towards those same standards and realize you'll be judged on those same standards.
Well, that is the goal. It is not, it's not happening really. Teachers are being told to they're given the curriculum and then they're being told to stick to the curriculum and they're being checked to make sure they're sticking to what they were given.
Let's talk about that. Who checks? Who checks that they're doing it?
The site-based administrator.
So building administrators, when you say site-based administrators, does that mean like principal, assistant principal?
Yes.
Okay, so pardon me while I ask all these questions. So then how do I check? Do I have a checklist as administrator and I go look for things? How does that happen? Is it formal, or do they just say to the principals, you need to make sure this is happening?
I don't know what is told to the principals. I'm not in those meetings, but I do know that they do, walkthroughs. They'll walk through a classroom and see if they are following the curriculum.
So instructional walkthroughs. Okay, if I am a teacher who doesn't do it, what happens to me?
If it is a formal observation, you would be given a poor evaluation. If it isn't, you'll probably just be spoken to and told to abide by the curriculum. And I think that's where the disconnect happens, because having the option of having curriculum provided is wonderful. It's wonderful because we do have a lot of new teachers who may not have the experience and the know-how on how to build a curriculum on their own. And so I think having that option is wonderful. What I think just needs to be tweaked is having a little more faith and trust in your educators and give them the option of either tweaking the curriculum that is received or coming up with their own, as long as it aligns with the standards. I do know that in my past, the teachers who did it that way, simply because they had the ability to do it, definitely got the best numbers. They definitely were the most successful teachers in their buildings. And I do believe that it really leads to success when the teacher has the ability to control exactly how she is presenting the standards-based information.
So I heard a couple things. I mean, this is sort of the big things, that you have some voice in what it looks like, that you're given something to start with and you have some options, but you don't just start from scratch. It is aligned with standards and somebody checks on you and supports you. So we probably mentioned it, but there's probably training and support that goes with it as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is.
Right. So for the other folks in the room, as you think about curriculum rollout in your district or any other thing that actually gets done in most places, and what I've reflected on when I was thinking about this earlier is I realized, gosh, there are a lot of things that don't get done in most places. But beyond curriculum, are there other examples you can think of that happen regularly and happen well? I don't know, in your world, Lucy, if you have something that, are you covered by federal law or something that, when you think about your part of the world, do you get a wide embracing of what you're trying to get done and folks do it well? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
In my work, it's just a lot of coaching. So in order to do it well, the teacher has to be willing to be coached. Mm-hmm. And I have to be basically invited to visit them. So there has to be that motivation, that willingness to want to improve.
So if you thought about the district, what % of the district does the kind of stuff you want them to do?
What % of the district does the kind of stuff we want them to do?
Yeah, and does it fully and does it well?
25%.
Okay. And I don't know about the rest of you, Brittany or others, if you think about rolling something out, what works to get widespread acceptance? And the phrase that I learned in my life is what is done consistently and superbly well. Consistently meaning done by everybody in the building, and superbly well meaning executed and done in the way it's intended to be done. And it sounds like curriculum is probably the closest thing to that gets done everywhere pretty well.
What about like MTSS or the RTI process?
No.
Do you still do that? I don't know. That,
So Ron, are we aligning what we think components is what's doing well as a guide for rolling out engagement?
You
That's-
have read my mind, Dr. Brim. So here's the challenge. You know, you guys put this great plan together. We know it works. Let's just talk about the first thing that Nancy mentioned, customer service training. And we said as a group, we want that all office staff, all teachers ultimately will get this customer service training. So how do we roll that out so it's done consistently throughout the district, meaning all the buildings do it and they do it well? And that's what I was trying to think of. Is there a process you have that works in Pinellas? So if we use the example that Nancy shared around the curriculum, that would mean that somehow it isn't that teachers would get to decide, are we doing it, but they'd have some input in what it looked like, how it was done. They were, let's see what I wrote down. They would be able to review and write and work with teams to kind of fiddle with it so that they were part of it. And then when it's rolled out, it would be checked by site-based administrators. There would be some walkthroughs. There would be both formal and informal observation. They would be asked for feedback on it when it was done, and it was aligned with the best standard. So if we did all of that, that would parallel the curriculum role, and that somebody really important mandates it. So Kevin says, we're doing curriculum, and people don't say, I'm not doing curriculum. You want to work, you got to do the curriculum. So somebody, Kevin-like, would say, this is getting done.
I can add that at the beginning of every year, the equity office works with teaching and learning, and they create an instructional PowerPoint that has like all of the say this, say that, basically the script on every slide. And that's pushed out to every principal. And then the principals are told exactly what date at what time to go over this training. And if there are any handouts, everybody gets the same exact handouts. And so
Lucy, who mandates that? Who? Because to make it happen on the same day, the same time, someone fairly far up the food chain has to say, you're doing it.
Yeah, typically it's Kevin Hendricks.
Okay.
And teaching and learning. So what he says goes.
Okay, so Dr. Brim, back to your question, is the approach to rolling out the plan you all created as a group getting Kevin Hendricks to say, this is going to be done? Let's using one piece of that, the customer service training. It's being done, and someone has created the training piece, but here's the day, here's the time, here's what you're going to do, and here's how we're going to check on it.
So Kevin's teaching and learning, which is instructional staff. It does not include the front office staff. There are some pieces during that pre-planning that involve office staff, but that he would not be the person who would do it. It would be more area superintendents telling the principals with the front office staff. But teaching and learning is not going to hit that front office staff other than the general requirements or trainings that everyone needs to get. The rest of his mandates have to do with instructional staff.
And so that would be my comment as well. When you're dealing with curriculum, it's addressing the academic components and the value and the importance of that. So when you look at customer service, when you look at making sure everyone is feeling welcome to our district, welcome to our schools, you have to attach that to, if it's not done, what is the fallout to that? And I think that's important. And that fallout is we lose families.
Yeah. And it absolutely impacts learning, because you guys talked about family engagement is really an instructional strategy. It's about ultimately, once you've built that relationship and gotten this trust, saying, help us with the learning.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing that.
Ron, can I jump in for a second? I just wanted to welcome Ellen. Ellen and Demoris joined us. Demoris has been a member before, but Ellen is the director of our student assignment department. She just contributed. So I just wanted to recognize that she's here, and thank you, Ellen, for getting us down that path. That was a good comment. And she's taking over for Brittany. So just updating.
And she's done a lot as we relate to this customer service component.
So I'm hearing that it is Kevin has sway over the folks who provide instruction, but area superintendents have sway over the rest of the folks who might come under the umbrella of other people working in the building. So it sounds like a question would be, in this rollout, what do you think about the other pieces of what Nancy said, where, whatever, we had customer service was one of the things you put on your priority, but there were other things to do at the building for these building teams. So having a team take the lead, does it make sense to say, not only get the mandate, the active mandate from the leadership, but then to bring some teachers from across the district into the design, into the maybe the writing of the training, getting some teacher ownership in that. Yes, Ellen's got her hand up. That was quick.
My office deals with all the parent complaints. It's not necessary. Yes, there is a teacher component as far as frustration with parents who may feel like communication, but the main point of contention with families and their issues are when they get to the school, the front office staff, and not telling them that they can't help them, or there's not a computer, or they have to call student assignment. We lose a lot of families because of how they're greeted as soon as they enter the door.
Mhm.
Part of the problem is, like they mentioned Kevin Hendrick, he owns curriculum, teaching and learning. One of the things that I took over my job was who's in charge of DMT training? Who's in charge of office clerk?
What training did you say? MT?
So like the data, people who work in the front office. And there's not really ownership of that to go out. Area superintendents oversee the principals. So to me, and they all know the importance of customer service, they're going to be our best bet to be able to emphasize the importance of that for the principals to follow through or with that. But we've been talking about, and I just shared with them last week, how many students per school are leaving and not attending their school. And customer service is a big piece. So I'm going to be working with them to follow up a little bit on which ones we need to work on. Do you know that Strategic Partnerships does a customer service training? So to me, that's going to be the best bang for your buck, so to speak.
So Ellen, one of the things when Dr. Brinson early last year he made this suggestion on customer service training, he was talking about front office staff, but he also said every single soul in the district needs this training as well. But let's just talk about the group you're discussing. So if there is a training, when we think about what's rolled out district-wide and what works well in the curriculum, some of the things that the way Nancy was describing is that then there would also be someone going in and checking, like, did you actually apply that training? And are you nice? And are you doing the things is that part of the practice as well? Or does it currently just sort of stop at a training?
Okay, so if I can interject, some of the new curriculum professional development is partly mandatory in order for them to effectively roll out. When we do our customer service training and family-friendly training, it is choice. Nothing where it's mandated.
Right.
There's no requirement from top leadership. So we're dealing with an opportunity of choice versus a requirement to be effective in the rollout.
And Dr. Brim, with that requirement comes it sounds like there's some oversight that and some checking, like you need to do it. And if you don't do it, we're going to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, thinking back to Dr. Brinson's original idea of everybody, it may have to be done in a couple different ways, given who the group is and who's in charge. Miss Sheila, you have your hand up. I love that. I actually saw it.
It just occurred to me, and I'm not sure why it's never occurred to me before, but when Ellen mentioned DMT training, so instead of, perhaps we could, ponder the idea of, instead of having a separate training, that we have some piece of customer service or family-friendly schools, be a part of all the training that is mandatory, that is occurring, the DMTs, I'm sure there are bookkeepers. I mean, everybody,
drivers, anybody who interacts with a family.
Right. I mean, and so not that they have to come to a separate one, right? But that they, yes, okay, our training is sometimes 2, sometimes 3 hours. We're not going to add 2 or 3 hours to the, DMT training, but we could embed key principles and that way at least get an in and get a broader, quicker, rollout, and then come back with, I don't know, was based on Ellen's comments about DMT, and I had never thought about that before, so.
And some of that information Ellen just talked about, that she has the data as far as, you know, kids can't be found, families, but also as Mrs. Luciana began to reach out, she's experiencing those pieces with a lot of non-English speaking families. And so we have to also keep all of that in the loop to make sure that as we build, as we talk, that we're considering all families. And I think that's going to be huge in a direction we have not really focused on per se collectively.
So as you all are talking, that seems doable but daunting. That was one of the 5 things on the list of things we said we would do this year. And now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, to do just that, it's going to consume a lot of energy and time. And then we have these other things. It just was occurring to me, gosh, I wonder if we need to focus even more and not have 5, but have 1 or 2 that we try to happen this year, because just this thought of getting every work group, every, whether it's DMTs, my new phrase for the day, or bus drivers or teacher, getting all of them to have a common understanding of what you mean by customer service, and then to apply that, that's a big lift. So that's just occurring to me as you all are talking. And I'm getting this theme. I didn't get it written down, Dr. Brim, but it was essentially, you said in a very nice way, our problem has been, it's always been optional. It's got to not be optional. It's got to be, this is something you will do. So let me ask you, I'm watching the clock a little bit here too as well. Let me ask you as a group, let's just use customer service training as the thing that we might do this year, and that every employee group would get this. And then it'd be something that they got training on, but then there was also some oversight and some ongoing support, but also monitoring. How do we get that to become mandatory? As a group, who do we get to say? I saw Ellen wrote preach when she was saying getting all those groups. Who are the ones who have to make that happen? Who do we have to approach and say, please make this mandatory?
I would say Dr. Corbett. I think also if we consider that a lot of the support staff go for certificates of distinction, and so they take a series of courses to get that certification. This could easily become one of those items that they need to take in order to obtain their certificate of distinction, which again gives them a pay increase.
I was going to say, what's the motivation? Is it just a certificate? Is it no? There's money as well. So there's notoriety, but there's also some financial. Okay.
Yeah.
I see Nancy not here. Okay, so that's kind of a carrot one. So now you have to. I apologize. I'm external. What is Dr. Corbett's role?
Dr. Corbett is the deputy superintendent. He works really closely with the area superintendents as well as Dr. Grego. And he does work very closely with my team, which is the equity, they changed the name now, it's inclusion and innovation. So he works closely with us as well. And Dr. Corbett is an ally in the sense that he is great at listening and gathering best practices.
Okay.
My opinion.
So if Dr. Corbett, who works with those area superintendents who have the supervision of the building administrators, that is a lot of authority. That's a lot of weight. That's a lot of power to bring about change. I like that. And then I love the carrot part of making it part of the certificate of distinction. So who oversees that? Who could say, oh, this can be part of the certificate of distinction? Is that also Dr. Corbett?
Professional development.
Yeah, Mark Narkier.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that.
Mark Narkier.
Narkier, okay.
Not Napier, but Narkier.
Okay, and then I just see Ellen wrote, needs to go to the executive leadership team. Tell me more about that, Ellen.
Oh, sorry. The executive leadership team is Dr. Grego, Dr. Corbett, the executive, the area superintendents, as well as associate superintendents. So I know I presented several times about the importance of customer service there. I was able to get my team funded to do customer service training through Disney. And then the bus drivers also have gotten access to that training as well, for more of a focus. So it includes all the people, the main decision makers. So if it goes to that and is approved there, then it would filter down with everyone else.
And so it sounds like you've really paved the way on this piece, and you've got some really strong piece to work with. Can you see that training be expanded to instructional staff?
Yes. Yes.
Laughing at me.
I do. Part of my responsibilities includes like our magnet programs where people apply to go.
Right.
So it's already been a big piece in what we're working with our magnet coordinators. It doesn't always get down to the teachers. Sometimes it's summer trainings, but we incorporate that customer service piece in there as well for the importance of that. But I think it'd be easy enough to come up with a training with that. And if it's getting the weight from the executive leadership team, those trainings can be in there. If there's support staff, they can get the certificate of distinction, like Lucy said, and it could be part of that increased pay. If it's something that is decided upon that is important, there could be stipends possibly attached if they make that determined for teachers to go for that training too. But to me, that the pitching it or presenting it, whether it's Dr. Brinson or a committee from this committee, if they give the green light, then it's going to be a lot easier to get those pieces in place. And they're the ones who would decide if it should be mandatory or not.
So Ellen, I don't know if you ever heard me share this piece of data, just as a little bit of an aside. I work with the Salt Lake City, and the big school district is called the Granite School District, but their person in Dr. Brim's role, one of the things he's been doing is there are a lot of parents who are just mad at the schools, and he's trying to get at the root cause. Why are they so mad? And in his research, what he has found is that in many, many cases, and it sounds like you've probably had the same experience, they can boil it back to a less than 1 minute interaction with someone at the school that just caused so much trouble. And now they're having to undo that. And the damage was quick. The undoing is really long. And yeah, I see you shaking your head. Nancy, you've been very patient with your hand up.
Well, I just think that the way to get the buy-in from the teachers to take an optional, even if it was an optional training, and I think rolling it into other trainings is probably a good idea. But the bottom line is teachers for years have been saying that they wish that they could have, that one of their problems with moving kids forward is that they don't have the support of the parents. So if you come at it from the point of view that you're solving one of their long-held problems, you're providing this as a solution to a problem that teachers have said, we can't get the support of parents, and sometimes it's hard to move that child forward when you don't have the support at home. So if you are rolling this out as a training on how to get the support of parents so that your job is made easier in the classroom, I think you get more buy-in that way. Because
I like that.
Yes. So, instead of mandating as something additional to do, if you come off from that side.
We heard what you said. We're responding to your request.
Right.
That's all in the marketing.
Exactly. That's exactly. When you want to sell something, you want to sell something to people to serve a need. That's how you sell it. And that's
and if something was pitched to me where when I was in the classroom, it could have given me more tools to be able to get that, I would have been more likely to sign up.
Okay, because there's a difference between being mandated to do it and doing it well. And part of it is the mandate helps, but part of it is that exactly what you've just said. So here's another question. One of the things you all talked about last year and is one of the upcoming pieces is it is time for a policy refresh on the family engagement policy in the district. I have two questions about it. My first question is, would it be useful to say, for example, if we had a policy that said you need to engage families into supporting learning, and you need to have a relationship and share data, but and it was part of more explicit in the policy. Does it become useful then to say to a building site administrator, this isn't a policy required. We're here to help you do this. We're here to help you do something that you have to do. Is the policy approach, I mean, it's important to have the right stuff in there just to have it, but in Pinellas, can policy help drive change? Is it an effective lever for change in other ways? And I see Nancy's like thinking. You have very expressive eyes, Nancy. I don't know what the rest of you think about the if policies.
Gets me in trouble sometimes.
I don't think it's going to drive change. I think it'll give us the leverage to produce the change. And when I say that is that once things are set in place, and if there is pushback, then the leverage to say, but it is aligned in our policy that we must do this. So I don't think it's going to more so be excited to push us to do it. It's just going to give us that leverage that we have a bone to fall back on when there's a pushback.
Okay. We have some other folks in here. What do you think about the policy approach? Do you agree with Dr. Brim? Is that it's there, it's useful, and it's important to have there, and it can be used as a lever for the change? An example might be if it's set in policy, every building will have a family engagement team that has teacher and family voice. If that was there, and you could go to the building and say, well, it's in there, so let's help you do that well.
My experience is very limited. Each year I have to update and bring policy changes for like district application program.
Mm-hmm.
And for things that like similar that I think is a great idea and I think should be in policy, there's always extra thought given, because once it's in, it's hard to take out. So what I have found with things that I've wanted, it's been more of, that can go in procedures. That could be here. So I have not always.
So let me ask you, who says that when you say
so
policy?
So there's a chain of command as far as like with the DAP process. So it first goes to teaching and learning to get their input. Whatever passes teaching and learning, I then bring to the executive leadership team. And then the executive leadership team also has attorneys on it. Whatever passes the executive leadership team then goes to the school board for recommended changes, readings, hearings, that type of thing.
So if we redid the policy, we would redo it, then we get input from teaching and learning, and then the executive team.
Teaching and learning is only through the instructional staff. It would probably go through Lori, Dr. Brim's boss.
Yes, Lori,
There's a separate.
And then also Lori Dart, the general counsel for her feedback.
Okay. But let me ask you, Ellen, if it's actually in there, so some of those things you wanted in there that didn't make it, had it made it, would that give you leverage that you need? Would that be, because you said once it's in, it's hard to get out. Would that help you?
So it does for my piece with it, because I'm like, it's policy, it has to do. So, and it also sets up a consistency for me. Whereas if it's questioned on how or why, it gives me guidelines to be able to fall back on and say, well, our policy, school board policy states
right.
ABC.
And so we're here to help you to be successful with this. It sort of takes it becomes, in a sense, that's the mandating group is the board saying this is policy, so let's help you do it well.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay?
But so it all depends. It has to get past that ELT. So in the case of this piece, Dr. Brim would go with Lori Matway, and then it would be taken to ELT from her spoke of the wheel, so to speak.
But if part of that policy involved instructional staff, they would probably reach out to that as well.
Well, they're part of the ELT committee. So ELT includes all like the heads of all the different aspects. So there's operations of facilities, there's area superintendents, there's attorneys. So if it gets to that, that's who would make the decision. And then it would go to the board. They wouldn't just put it in without it going to the board.
So I have asked lots of questions of Ellen and of Nancy today, and I don't want the other folks to be, and a little bit of Lucy, to be left out of this conversation. As you hear us talking, are there things that occur to you? Because our task now is to bring this plan, bring your plan to life and get this thing moving. And so I'm really hearing that a training piece is a good way to go, but also the policy piece is a good way to go. And having both of those could really help move this forward. Like Mr. Lee or Ms. Winia or Ms. Jones, any thoughts, would you say, yeah, what folks have said is on track? Any other advice for us as we think about the next steps?
So from the parent perspective, I kind of understand the customer service for the front office areas and incorporating that. The biggest thing is with my role in PTA and doing this for the last 7 years, what are you guys doing and how are you incorporating that with the teacher burnout that's going on? Because in all honesty, some of the feedback I've seen, not this year, but just because teachers all around Florida, adding more trainings that don't pertain to their students' development right now is not always being taken in a very positive light because they have a lot on their plate. Adding more, yes, that's great to have the monetary value included, but to make sure that that is something that can also align with helping students. Yeah, I know family engagement is not always up to par, but our students is where their main goal is. So how do we incorporate all of that? Because yes, this is great, but as a parent, I'm more concerned with the way my teachers teach than my teachers interact with me. So
one of the things that as you all developed your plan last year, it's very clear that this is about partnering, the school district partnering with families in ways that support learning and student development. So it's very much about what you said. And if I heard you right, making sure that teachers understand this is not just something nice to do. This is an essential piece of successful student development. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yeah, because one of the things, Rosemary, and thank you for joining our group. One of the things we talked about is a lot of things that schools across America do traditionally with families actually are, they really don't support clearly student development, student learning. And that the focus of this whole initiative is how do we get folks to let go of that stuff and really concentrate on the high leverage strategies where we partner with families to help sure students are successful. And part of it is giving them permission to stop doing some stuff. That also becomes the hard part because we do so many things and there are traditions, we just keep doing them and they're just not really good uses of time to not add to the plate, but get them to take that stuff off and put the stuff on that makes a difference. Because you're absolutely right. We all want our kids to do well in school. So let's make sure that almost everything we do is about that, not just extra stuff, because we're all really busy. So I like how you phrase, I like your phrase related to student development. I like that.
I also think, Ron, it goes back to the whole mindset shift that we have been trying to do over the last 5 years is that that family engagement is a educational strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at it from that point, it somewhat, as you begin to really think about it, it aborts the fact that it's another thing, more so that it's a necessary partnership to get at what Rosemary was talking about, the excellence of achievement.
Yeah, and I think, Dr. Webb, I'm gonna parse words with you a little bit. So I think the message is family engagement can be an instructional strategy, but we have to do differently. And yes, that's the message. Yeah, because it is, we don't want them to think what you're doing now, all those things are the things that work. So I love the way you said that. Okay, so I'm looking at the clock. We have 6 minutes left. So this has been really helpful for Dr. Brem's office is to, we got to roll this thing out district wide, and your advice and support and counsel is so absolutely useful. As you can, I don't know if you can tell, but we go back and we think very hard about what you share with us, and you shared some really good ideas today about moving this forward. forward. One of the things we will be looking for your feedback on as we move forward is the policy, because we really are going to get this thing rewritten. And it sounds like, we know, as we get this draft together, that Dr. Brim can take up the policy chain. Sheila, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about the homework that we're going to possibly give them, and how, and what the focus of our next conversation will be?
Sure. I also want to just indicate for those who are joining us for the first time that I did say we were missing some key players, and we do have representatives from some of the other departments. You may have been thinking as we're talking about this, gee, where's someone from ESOL? Gee, where's someone from Title I? And so we do have those members, and they will be a part of, any kind of a review or participation in the development of new policy as we move forward. And what we talked about doing at the end of this meeting was to say to you, what role would you like to play? We've looked at the policy. We actually started last year, I think it was March, that I sent out the policy. We have 3 policies that apply to family engagement that are currently in our whole Pinellas County Schools policy guide. So we have lots of duplication. And I think what we want to do is get some input on making it streamlined, making it more actionable, making it embrace the new research and the processes and procedures that we have set up to move forward, with our school-based teams, et cetera. So I guess I'm asking you, this group that we have here today, what role would you like to play in that whole policy revision process? Would you like to, be my editor? Would you like to review revisions? Would you like to meet with me and actually work through some of the sections? We're open to any of that. We're not trying to, put our work off, but we want the policy to embrace, all of us that touch and interact with families. Maybe just react or put it in the chat, or you can look for an email from me afterwards with an answer to the role you want to play. We want your input. So,
and I think if it's safe to say, Sheila, at the very least, we'll bring, kind of like in developing the plan last year, we posed questions, listened to what you said, and then we tried to craft something out of it and bring it back to you for feedback and review. So at a minimum, we're going to be asking for some feedback on that. What I'm hearing you say, Sheila, is that if you're interested in what, when Nancy was talking about like the rollout of something where some teachers have some co-creation, do you want some co-creation in all of this as well? We would love to include anyone who would like to help with that piece, if that's a fair way to say it.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Title I will, because part of it is their policy. So I know they'll want to, be a part of the crafting part. Nancy, thank you for offering to be my reviewer, our reviewer.
I was just thinking of something Lucy had said a little earlier about, because it's all about attitude. When she was saying about how sometimes, like, they're provided scripts, well, that is how teacher, and that's what's happening sometimes with the curriculum. Say this, say this, say this, say this at this time. And if we come off that way with this kind of program, you should say this and say this, you're going to get pushback. Because imagine, as a professional, think to yourself, how would that feel if someone said to you, you must say this, 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 and you must say it when we tell you to, how we tell you to. I mean, as a professional, it's deeply insulting and it's deeply debasing. And we can't come off like that. We need to be getting from them. We need to find the people who already do it well and say, what do you do to get parents to be so cooperative with you? And what do you do to get, and if you can reach out to those people and have them help put together the training and possibly policy, you've got a winning situation. You've got something people will buy into. It just works when it's done from the bottom up rather than from the top down. It's always more successful, especially in today's world. So I would be more than happy to look at everything, anything and everything you want input on. But I just want you to think about how you'd feel as a professional if you were told, here's your script, don't vary from it.
I loved, Nancy, what you said about, looking for there are pockets of brilliance, I'm sure, throughout your district where teachers really have engaged families as partners in learning.
Yes.
And if we could figure out who those folks are, and I heard you say this, right, and bring them into the thinking here, when it comes time to roll out, it's not just Dr. Brim saying this, it's teachers saying this, and Pinella's teachers saying this is doable, this is important. Okay. We've hit our 12 o'clock time. Dr. Brim and Ms. Kane, is there anything you'd like to share? You guys, I have to say, I loved you guys. It's exactly what we got. Lots of ideas about what it looks like to roll something out. What works in Pinellas, what has worked, what doesn't work. It's very helpful today as we do our thinking as a team in Dr. Brim's office. Any words of wisdom, Dr. Brim or Ms. Kane, before we let the group go today?
I would just say thank you for your input. And although this was a lot of dialogue and we used a lot of analogy based on other departments, the key is that how do we make sure we're doing what is necessary to change the ship about family engagement, getting everyone on board, or more so is that we see the impact of it in our student achievement. So I think it's going to be huge as we continue to discuss how we get, again, the purpose of this entire council or board is that making sure leadership is on board. Ms. Kane, I don't know if you have.
No, I loved the ideas. I took lots of notes. I managed to remember to record only about 10 minutes in, so I didn't lose much because I do go back and I do take more notes from what we've talked about, and we are deeply grateful for the input, and we'll look forward to seeing you. The next meeting, I believe, is December 8th. Same time, 11 o'clock, same place via Zoom. So
expect a policy conversation.
Yes, yes.
Fantastic. Thank you
Thanks
so much.
everyone. Especially thanks to our new faces.
You're welcome. Hopefully we didn't scare you off.
Andrea, sorry, I know we didn't get back to you talking more about the e-learning, but if there's something that you want me to include, more than just my words in my recap, I always follow up with an email after each of the district team meetings. So if you want to send me, maybe more than just a flyer or just the flyer, whatever, just so we make sure that
this
whoever's in
meeting
attendance
definitely help me with my messaging to get the messaging out, and maybe I can just write up a small blurb that you might be able to share with your constituents. And Luciana is also part of this meeting, so she can provide the perspective of a coach who is really invested in helping, especially Latino families.
Right. Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, Rosemary, I definitely will. Appreciate your being here.
Very interesting comments. I have taken some really extensive notes. What's resonating with you? Do you have a minute to debrief?
Yes, yeah, I do.
What is resonating with you from